to attend the SCO summit. One of the first meetings that the Prime Minister is going to have, viewers, is with the President of China, Xi Jinping, and also on Monday, a very consequential meeting with President Putin. Now, both these meetings will sandwich, of course, the big summit meeting, which is going to take place on Monday in the morning, where, of course, the Prime Minister will be able to confer with a large number of member states of the SCO, including the possibility of perhaps an awkward meeting with the Pakistani representative. We're still awaiting word as to who from Pakistan is going to represent that country. But fundamentally, that'll be a sideshow more for those who want to focus on the optics. But the most substantive part of this particular meeting, or the summit really, will be the conversations that the Prime Minister is going to have with Xi Jinping and, of course, President Putin. Many people have already suggested that India and China have reset ties. That's not quite the case. This has not been a reset. This has been a warming thaw that has melted about 5 to 6 years of cold, frosty relations on the back of the Galwan incident, the Galwan provocation, entirely, of course, orchestrated by China. The conversation between the dragon and the elephant, so to speak, will focus, we're being told, on the geonomics aspects and not so much on the geopolitics, because the gulf on the geopolitical side remains deep, and there is also, of course, a trust deficit. Trade is perhaps easier to find middle ground on, so expect a flurry of initiatives being signed, MOUs perhaps being signed, declarations being made on that front, but fundamentally don't expect a breakthrough or a reset, because that conversation is going to steer clear of the thorny issues. The idea here at this moment is that America must get a message that India has more interlocutors, more potential partners than itself, and therefore it cannot dictate terms. On that flight, of course, in just a few days, the Prime Minister will wing in, and hopefully he will build on what he said a few days ago was the need for both Beijing and New Delhi to stabilize their ties so that it becomes more predictable and constructive. A constructive dialogue would mean that the two countries will at least agree to a time frame, perhaps in the near future, to resolve some of their sticky issues which lead to disputes like the border angles, but don't expect much beyond that. The fact is that the relationship between India and China at this moment stands on an awkward footing simply because the Chinese have viewed it from the prism of a zero-sum game. So it is for the Chinese now to take that extra step to convince New Delhi that they're serious about trying to bring equilibrium, trying to lower the tensions between the two countries. And that will build confidence, which will, of course, lead to perhaps more substantive gains in the year ahead, or perhaps even the years ahead. Already 24 rounds of border negotiations have taken place under the rubric of the special representatives, but that conversation will be parked aside, as I said, as both Beijing and New Delhi signal to Trump that they are exploring other options, which means that both countries will want to at least walk away from this, suggesting to Trump, to America, that the East can work together, that the SCO is viable, that it's not just the West that holds all the cards in basically negotiating some sort of an equanimous order in the globe. More importantly, viewers, there is obviously the conversation that is going to take place with President Putin. That's an interesting and important conversation because, as you know, it is tickling the Americans pink to see India continually doing business with Russia. The signal from that will, of course, be that India bows to none. It will not surrender its territorial integrity and, most importantly, its economic autonomy. That is the fundamental message that Modi will want to send to Trump by ensuring that that conversation ends in perhaps the talk of increasing trade between Moscow and New Delhi, and perhaps also at some level bringing Mr. Putin around to accepting a peaceful resolution to the crisis in Ukraine. I know that this sounds contradictory, but it isn't. If New Delhi can nudge Moscow to find common cause with Kiev, it would be in the interest of New Delhi as well as, of course, global peace. But that conversation is going to take place on Monday. Already the newspapers here, in my hand is the China Daily, viewers, and that is already beginning to report on the SCO in a big way. You're already beginning to see the headlines talking about how the Chinese have done a fantastic job in trying to bring these disparate countries together on one platform. Whether all of this can lead to viability, greater viability in the SCO remains to be seen, but definitely a conversation would get started with two principal players, New Delhi and Beijing, which means that the SCO, if it can get over this little wrinkle, could become a potential alternative, another geopolitical anchor to try and wrest back the initiative from the West. The overview perfectly sets up the debate, viewers. Let me begin by saying that Prime Minister's decision to reset ties with China and cement them with Russia are a significant signal of his intent to underline India's strategic autonomy. The Chinese may have made the first move, but by taking Beijing at face value, the Prime Minister is investing significant diplomatic capital that must be rewarded. The onus is on China to signal that it respects India's red lines. The meeting with Xi Jinping will provide Delhi with the first indications of how far Beijing intends to go to rebuild confidence. The meeting with Putin is of a slightly different nature. India and Russia are locked in a significant strategic embrace. Moscow has been a dependable ally, but it is over-leveraged to China, and that's a fact. This reduces Moscow's elbow room to be a guarantor of India's interests in the Indo-Pacific. Be that as it may, there's little doubt that India's play at the SCO and Modi's bilaterals are directed at Washington, and that's one of the reasons why the United States has chafed at what it calls India being, quote, in bed with authoritarians, unquote. The question is, can India's play at the SCO reshape the rules of engagement? That's the fundamental question that we're going to be posing tonight in our debate, viewers. But you can see how the pros and the cons of this SCO outreach stack up. Those are, of course, in the realm of a lot of detailing. But the United States has lectured India on its agreement with these authoritarians. Does India's engagement with SCO Big 2 undermine its democratic credentials? Can India use its diplomatic outreach at the SCO at summit and bilateral levels as leverage? Can China earn India's trust by showing a willingness to appreciate India's red lines? How can China, that looks to exert its hegemony, be a stabilizing force and natural fit for cooperation in the region? Viewers, let's open this up and have an honest conversation tonight. We have with us Brahma Chileni, strategic affairs expert. We have with us Professor Victor Gao, Vice President, Center for China and Globalization, Chair Professor Soochow University, live from Beijing. We also have with us Tatiana Kukareva, Russian journalist, who joins us from Moscow. So, viewers, we're going to multilocate this conversation, but hopefully we will be able to agree on some things, and that's really the endeavor, isn't it, as I report from Tianjin. Let me first begin with Professor Chileni here. Professor Chileni, I want to ask you a very basic question. The United States says that this outreach is inherently contradictory because India is grasping the hand of authoritarians. It sort of has lectured us. It has tried to impede our strategic autonomy. But obviously, India is going ahead. Does India's engagement with the SCO big to undermine its democratic credentials? What would you say to America tonight?
Well, India is the only full democracy among the SCO's 10 member states. So India is clearly the odd man out in the SCO, and we have seen some Indian discomfort with the SCO. We saw, for example, Modi not attending last year's SCO summit in Astana, Kazakhstan. And in 2024, even as India held the rotating chair of SCO, Modi downgraded the summit to a virtual format. He did not hold an in-person SCO summit. He held an online summit. So it has been apparent for some time that the SCO carries diminishing value for Indian foreign policy. And interestingly, now by traveling to China mainly to attend the SCO summit in Tianjin, Modi's participation appears less about the SCO and more about signaling rapprochement with China. Now that might actually be riling Washington, but there is a double irony here. As the Alaska summit showed, that Trump is seeking to break the China-Russia strategic axis by befriending Moscow. He's seeking to woo Russia in order to break this axis. At the same time, by stepping up his muscular approach toward India, by slapping tariffs and sanctions on India, he's compelling India to mend ties with China, just at the very time when the US needs India as a counterbalancing power in Asia. So the lack of clarity, strategic clarity in Washington is becoming increasingly apparent. It's apparent that there is no grand strategy in Washington. Today's foreign policy in Washington is driven largely by narrow commercial considerations.
That's interesting. So let me bring in the Russian perspective here. Ms. Kukareva, let me ask you this, because a lot of people will say that Russia is over-leveraged to China in some respects, and therefore its elbow room to perhaps safeguard India's interest, strategic interests in Indo-Pacific region are limited. Would you agree with that assessment? And also, of course, how would you respond to Team Trump that says, oh, this is India sort of in bed with authoritarians and so on and so forth? How would you respond to that?
Well, Rahul, this is a very classic US narrative. You know, it just comes down to the basic strategy of divide and conquer. And by attempting to spin this is the democratic state and these states are not democratic, so you shouldn't really play with them. It just plays into the same narrative. And as we know, especially in the Western media, the simpler the narrative, the better it sells. So, but I don't believe that such narratives actually work within the global South. I don't believe they work with other mentalities. You know, they're very, very West orientated, and unfortunately, our American colleagues completely forget about this. And also to comment on something that Professor Chilani said, I think that we've seen thus far that Moscow is quite immune to simple wooing, be that from Donald Trump or whoever else, because, you know, there's one thing that people say and there's another thing that people do. And I do believe that it's been Moscow's position for quite some time is to judge by action, but not by, you know, sweet talk or else. I don't believe that we could say that Moscow is in any way over-leveraged. I think that again, even if we look at the numbers in trade, the numbers that continue to grow within the SCO states between them, right now this bloc has still so much potential in terms of pure numbers. In terms of right now we're down to 10 states, 2 observer states, and the general, the number of population involved in this is almost a quarter. Wait a second, no, I think it's even more. The numbers are just astounding, and they continue to grow, with more countries joining on the observer status. It's, there's just so much.
But there are so many contradictions, aren't there? I mean, look, the Chinese, the Pakistanis will be there. The Chinese are close to the Pakistanis. The Pakistanis are a red rag to India right now, as you can understand.
But this is the beauty of it, though. This is the beauty of these blocs, of countries with different interests, with their own strategic interests, coming together for dialogue. It's not about one order for all. It's about strategic interests of different states and then finding ways to collaborate, respecting those strategic interests. This is something that completely contradicts the old paradigm, and that's why we see all this wooing, so to speak, because the US and Western states are very used to one country dictating the interests to everybody else. Look at India and China. You said it yourself. This rapprochement is a massive deal, and the two countries are finding it. They're finding common ground. They're finding new areas of cooperation, despite all the differences.
So are you saying that the SCO can be, for India, leverage against America, that despite its contradictions, India can definitely, at some level or the other, send a message to Washington that, look, if you push us too much into a corner, we have other options, and they're viable?
I think it not only can, I think it is sending that message already, because since its inception, the SCO has already grown into a huge regional organization that, and even with the areas that right now are incredibly important to all of the countries involved, India and China all together, there is sustainability is on the table, clean energy is on the table. There's so many areas of cooperation, and with the fact that it now represents nearly a half of the world's population, not even a quarter, and a quarter of the global GDP, if I'm not mistaken. This is already a huge statement that India is making.
Okay, so Professor Chireni, before I'll come to you before I bring in Professor Gao. How do you respond to what Ms. Kukareva has spelled out here? What's your view on this?
On what precisely?
The fact that this can be a viable platform, that at some level or the other, these countries can find some commonality in interests and could even end up respecting their strategic interests.
Well, the fact is that the SCO has become increasingly disparate in nature in its membership. The Sino-Pakistan Strategic Alliance, which is embedded in the SCO, we should not forget that much as China has blocked India from joining the nuclear suppliers group until Pakistan is also admitted to the nuclear suppliers group, it succeeded in getting Pakistan into SCO alongside India in 2017. So the Sino-Pakistan Strategic Alliance is embedded in the SCO. is just one example of the disparate interests at play in the SCO. This hinders the transformation of the SCO into a more powerful and cohesive bloc like the Group of Seven. I just gave the example of China and Pakistan, but there are other examples within the SCO showing that this group is not cohesive, and it will be very difficult for this group to shape a common agenda. The fact, though, is that the SCO is very clearly coming under China's sway. China calls on other members to uphold shared values that it labels as, quote unquote, the Shanghai spirit. And the very fact that the SCO bears the name Shanghai gives it a Chinese imprint. So China is clearly in the driver's seat. But apart from that, I don't see the cohesiveness in the SCO that would transform it into a powerful multilateral grouping that can have, that can leave a defining footprint on international relations.
Okay, so that's a significant sort of difference here between the way you look at the SCO and the way Ms. Kukareva sort of looks at the SCO. So let me bring in Professor Victor Gao, because this sets up that little part of the conversation. Professor Gao, look, can China earn India's trust by showing a willingness to appreciate India's red lines and also respecting her strategic interests? Now, there is a significant problem. The elephant in the room is really the dragon and its association, its brotherhood with Pakistan. And we know that we see it as this sort of unified front that is confronting us here, New Delhi. So that's a challenge. And you will have to go an extra few yards to convince India that this challenge is not to India's sovereignty.
Thank you very much for having me. First of all, what is SCO? SCO is a group of countries which need to respect each other as equals, and all decisions need to be made on a consensus basis, meaning every member has a veto power if they do not like anything that SCO wants to do collectively. That makes it a very unique organization in the world of today. It's kind of comparable to the Security Council of the United Nations, where each of the 5 permanent member states has a veto power. Within SCO, every member has a veto power. That's number one. Number two is that I know that you are looking at SCO from the Indian perspective, but let me make a very straightforward. SCO will continue to grow and gain more and more momentum with or without Indian participation. I personally hope India will decide to stay within SCO and play increasingly important role, of course, but if India really chooses to leave SCO, no one will block India's exit. So it is up to India to decide for its own interest whether it wants to play a role of importance within SCO or whether it wants to be the sole outlier within SCO or whether it wants to bail out of SCO. It's nobody else's decision but India's decision. Now, when you talk about the red lines in China-India relations, let me ask you, what are the red lines you have in mind? I think between China and India, which I call the two only superpopulations in the world, we have so many similarities to each other, and we have the 2 largest populations in the world, and we need to really promote friendship and peaceful coexistence with each other. If there is any red line, let me tell you, the red line between China and India is that the McMahon line drawn up by a British should never be accepted as the final border between China and India.
Fine.
That is the red line.
No, that's true. But there are other ways of looking at this and skinning the cat. So basically, you're saying that our priorities prevail if India can fit its own priorities within the rubric of Chinese priorities, it's okay. Otherwise, you can take the highway. So this goes against this spirit of cooperation. It is a bizarre formulation on your part, because Professor, let's talk about one basic red line. We all against cross-border terrorism, for example. but China blocks every Indian attempt, very legitimate attempts, backed with a lot of proof, for example, to sanction terror groups based in Pakistan. These terror groups, and there's enough documented evidence that is being supplied internationally by even allies of Pakistan, like the United States, that show that they shelter terror groups that strike at will on Indian soil, kill Indians, innocent Indians. How does that spirit then guide you into creating this atmosphere of cooperation? Can you explain?
Yeah. Thank you very much for giving me the floor. First of all, SCO is not China's organization. Not at all. By any stretch of our imagination, please don't call SCO as a Chinese organization under Chinese sway. No, each of the SCO members, as well as observer states and those countries which line up to join SCO, each of them in their own capacity, is a very important stakeholder of SCO. Now, secondly, personally, let me use this opportunity to assure you that I and China want to condemn terrorism of all shapes, colors, and forms. But whenever there is a terrorist attack, I think all of us need to exhaust ourselves in identifying the real cause behind the terrorism.
No, Mr. Gao, Professor Gao, look,
any government.
I prefaced my question by saying that there was documented evidence in the case of the Jaish-e-Mohammed or certain individuals of the Lashkar-e-Toiba, internationally accepted United Nations resolutions were thwarted. That's what I'm talking about. I'm not just talking about a reaction from India, knee-jerk reaction where we blame X or Y player. We know there are problems, so let's not dance around that issue. But Professor Chileni, what we've heard from Professor Gao is that China's overhang or its presence is not overbearing. Do you accept this proposition? It is not China's SCO, but it's everyone's SCO. China is another player, equal among, first, not even first among equals, equal among equals.
Well, the fact is that the SCO, it was established in 2001. And you have to look at this evolution of the SCO over the years. That was founded originally by the leaders of China, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, and Uzbekistan. But China has spearheaded the SCO's subsequent evolution and expansion. So make no mistake, China has been in the driver's seat. And there may be no one power holding a veto power there. The fact is that this is a grouping that very much is China's own product. And China is very proud of the SCO because it carries the Shanghai name. Now, in that grouping, if it's going to be real equality among member states and real consideration for each other's interests and for preserving good neighborly relations, you would not have China encroach on Indian key borderlands in eastern Ladakh in a very brazen manner in April 2020 that led to a prolonged military standoff that has still not been fully resolved.
Right.
The two countries came virtually to war, to an actual war, because of the Chinese encroachments. Now, how does that really square up with the SCO's mandate, or with the so-called Shanghai spirit? The Shanghai spirit clearly says that you have to respect each other's interests. You need to uphold shared values. And yet, repeatedly, China has shown, not just in relation to India, but some of the other member states of the SCO, that it does not believe in its own Shanghai spirit.
Okay, so we have, as I said, the elephant in the room is the dragon. Sorry to use tautology, but the fact of the matter is this. So, viewers, we will have to now judge over the next few days how China reacts to India bilaterally during that very important meeting. how is it that the Chinese are going to frame that meeting and the issues involved? I'm not trying to prejudge the issue. We've just given you a realistic, clear as crystal picture of the disparate nature of the SCO. But that doesn't mean that we can preclude that it won't become an effective platform in the future. Ms. Kukareva, I hope that ties in with your optimism. I'll leave it at this because we're going to switch focus now and we're going to look at how America is going to be looking at this entire conversation. Viewers, the fallout from the secondary sanctions on India is exposing cracks in the India-US relationship. Once touted as a strategic partnership, the alliance is now under stress, as disagreeable statements from Trump's inner circle, including Peter Navarro, add fuel to the fire. Navarro's labeling of the Ukraine conflict as Modi's war and accusations of Modi cozying up to authoritarians has personalized DC's increasingly shrill diatribe against India's Prime Minister. This is an escalation that could even blight the famed personal rapport between Modi and Trump. We've seen those photographs of the two of them, those pictures, bonhomie, etc. That could be fractured. And the discontent isn't just limited to India's purchase of Russian oil. It's extending to immigration, to even security sensitivities, as DC cozies up to Islamabad. Listen in first, viewers.
India's been a good friend, but India has charged basically more tariffs than almost any other country. You know that, right? Over the years. But now I'm in charge, and you just can't do that.
They say, "Oh, we're not going to stop buying Russian oil." Now, what does that mean? I mean, we've talked about this, but it's worth talking to your viewers again. When India buys Russian oil at a discount, and then Indian refiners, in partnership in India with Russian refiners, make that and sell it at a premium to the rest of the world, right? Russia uses the money it gets to fund its war machine, kill more Ukrainians, and then the next thing that happens, of course, is Ukraine comes to us and Europe and says, give us some more money.
The H-1B, it's become a total scam. These companies game the system. You know, you have some of these companies that are laying off large numbers of Americans while they're also getting new H-1Bs and renewing H-1Bs. And a lot of times people used to say, well, you know, we're getting the cream of the crop from all around the world. The reality is that's not actually what H-1Bs are. Most of them are from one company or from one country, India. There's a cottage industry about how all that people make money.
Viewers, the fallout has been that India is asserting its sovereign policy choices, engaging Russia and China pragmatically, a veritable tilt to the east. The question now is how deep this rift runs, whether it's temporary noise or a fundamental recalibration, and to what extent. Will Modi's government leverage its global standing in its dealings with DC? Let's open this up for an honest conversation and dialogue. We've had one in the first part of this show when we looked at the SCO. Time here now to shift focus. Lisa Curtis, Director of the Indo-Pacific Security Program at the Center for New American Security, is there with us. David Sofair, Republican strategist, and James Russell, Associate Professor, Department of National Affairs, with us. So let's open this conversation. Ms. Curtis, this isn't all going very well with the India-US relationship. But more than that, it's not going down very well with Indian diplomats. You've seen statements that have come out of the Indian External Affairs Ministry. There is consternation. It may not be expressed openly in the open manner in which we hear Trump officials, sort of lecturing India. But there is disquiet. How far damaged is this relationship right now, if at all? What's your assessment?
Well, I think the relationship has deteriorated significantly in the last, 4 to 6 weeks because of all this negative rhetoric coming out about the relationship. I think there was hope that the two sides might still reach some kind of trade agreement, that, India might agree to reduce its dependence on Russian oil. India, after all, hardly imported any Russian oil at all before Russia's invasion of Ukraine, but has been taking advantage of the discounted prices. So there does seem to be room for India to move on that issue. But I think you're right. I think we are seeing escalating rhetoric from the Trump administration, Peter Navarro in particular. I think the comment that Russia's war on Ukraine is Modi's war is unfortunate. But at the same time, we do know that India is importing quite a bit of Russian oil, and we know that Putin is escalating his attacks on the Ukrainian people. Just this morning, I heard 600 drone strikes by Russia, 17 Ukrainian civilians killed, including children, in those attacks. So, this is something that, there should be a resolution. The U.S.-India relationship is extremely important for both countries. And I think it's time for both sides to, take this discussion behind closed doors and find a way forward.
Well, I think that's an impossibility with the Trump team. I mean, they take to every platform to make their mind very clear. But you said the comments are negative. That's one way of saying it. But essentially, there is hypocrisy, and some would say a crass transactionalism and moral selectivity. So, David Sofed, this is not helping at all. I can understand that you want to make you want to reduce this entire association and connect it to a principle, which is that, look, don't buy Russian oil because it's funding the war, but then apply it across the board. Apply it with Europe, apply it with China, apply it also with India. That gives you a consistent and, a sort of moral authority. But here you're kind of losing it.
Well, sure. And, I think that America, it is our role really to do quite a few things as we make America fair again. I agree with your other panelist, Lisa's points. She had some good ones on one side of the coin. But what's really going on here is American free trade and American fair trade. And we are coming after countries to make America fair again. And that is for the greater good of not only democracy, but of global safety. And that is really being played out here in a very, very aggressive way, because we don't have a choice. We had 4 years of terrible foreign policy and very oppressive global trade. So now we are actually, as Americans, our administration is cleaning that up. So, some tough words were being said by Peter Navarro, and, I could see how that, is a point, that the Indians don't take kindly to. But with that being said, we have to make America strong again, and global safety is a huge priority. So Russian oil, I get why the Indian government is buying it. It's cheap and it's plentiful, but at the same time as we renegotiate, fair trade, and it's American fair trade, under the American Fair Trade Initiative and our Global Safety Initiative, which has been very successful so far on a domestic front and an international one as well. We have to be laser focused driving.
Now, how is it successful internationally? Hang on, just a couple of interventions I would just want to quickly make, David Sofa. I mean, look.
Sure. Yes, please. Thank you.
We're coming at this from different points of view. You're sort of putting America first, which is which is
America fair, and our initiatives are for the greater good of the world.
I don't think
it has to be fair domestically.
See,
it has to be fair domestically.
No, hang on, because if you were thinking about your allies and their interests also. Look, in every relationship, there has to be a give and take. So the Indians say, this is not our war. This is a war that has been fought, and if you believe Trump, by Biden, actually, it's Biden's war. I've inherited it. I want to stop it. Great. You want to stop it. That's great. But we're very far removed from the theater of action. Why should our people suffer? Why should 1.4 billion Indians suffer? Because two people couldn't keep it together in Europe. So fundamentally, the principles and the priorities of the West cannot dictate anymore in a world that is supposed to be flat how we should be responding. We have to put India first and Indians first.
Likewise, Mr. Trump, for a long time with your tariffs and others.
So that's what I'm saying. If this is going to be if that is going to be the conversation, two maximalist positions, then you're really burning the bridges. So are you prepared to do that? Are you prepared to say, okay, and you're not doing that with China, and you're not doing that with Europe.
No, that's not true at all. So there's been a huge
volume of trade, sir, between Europe and Russia is much greater than the volume of trade between India and Russia. You see that? The facts are out there, indisputable. America is buying an amount of Russian oil and rare earth materials from Russia. You're trading with Russia, and you're saying, don't put Indians first. Put Americans first. How does that work?
I really see this, and this is just my personal view. I'd just like to say that, I'm extremely pro-Indian, and I love the Indian government, and I'm pro-democracy, and and I think that these are all good points. Now, I see this really as a secondary negotiation to do with the tariffs and the American Fair Trade Initiative. So, and I really see this as getting resolved pretty fast.
No, but Mr. Sofair,
I don't see this
there's
as
a distinction that has been made, and it has been made by Washington. Very quickly, before I bring in our third colleague here on the debate, James Russell. I'm just going to bring him in, but I just want to quickly press you on a quick points, Mr. Sofair.
Yes,
look, this is not about tariffs anymore. That conversation that conversation can be had. This is now about sanctions. There is a 25% plus sanction on India for doing business with Russia that we see everyone else doing very cozily. Europeans are doing it, the Americans are doing it, but they're getting away. The Chinese are doing it. They're getting away. So that's what is not squaring. That's not going to go away unless America says, okay, let's address this issue and slap this sanction across 3 continents. Then maybe we can have equity.
I think equity is quite a rich word. I see this, like I said, as a secondary tool to really push through the free trade initiative that we are aggressively fighting for in the States. So that's just my personal view.
Okay, so let me bring in James Russell. James Russell, if it's about ensuring free trade and fair trade and free trade, then shouldn't China be slapped with a sanction? Because surely the road through the road to free and fair trade runs through Beijing more, because they're buying more from Russia. They're supporting the Russian economy.
If I could make a comment about this to your viewers, I would say this: welcome to Trump land. Don't expect any consistency, either logical consistency or any strategic consistency in anything that comes out of this administration. President Trump has not surrounded himself with subject matter experts, for example, on the matter of the U.S.-India strategic relationship. His officials display no understanding of the historic context of the U.S.-India relationship, which has always included, as you correctly point out, a relationship with Russia that frankly has been wider and deeper between India and Russia than it has been with the United States. We in the United States, of course, would like that relationship to change, to return to put the United States in a primary position. But that displays a misunderstanding of India's historic independent line on a wide variety of international and geopolitical issues. I agree with my colleagues who say, this relationship is too important to be taken off track by arguing about, a few pennies here and there on international trade issues. But, you don't have a president who is pursuing strategic principles, who believes in strategic principles. Everything is transactional. Everything is for sale. That's the way the government in the United States, regrettably, today is run. And as I say, he does not have people around him who would add some breadth of knowledge and depth to their understanding of the U.S.-India relationship, its history, and its evolution. This is a relationship that has been pursued across a wide variety of Republican and Democratic administrations to bring it to where it is today. And it's a great mistake for the United States politically to be allowing some argument over tariffs. And I don't mean to sort of downplay the importance of these issues, but it's a great for the president to be making such an issue of this and leading to the possibility of a rupture between two of the most important countries in the world. I mean, India is slated to become the world's largest economy in the next couple of years. The United States has to have economic relationships with this country. So I am not surprised at all.
Well, let me ask you, because James Russell, it's no longer just about tariffs. We've got a very important official from the Trump regime, DeSantis, from the Republican Party, who's a governor.
Regime, I mean, it's not a regime, but okay.
Sorry?
I said it's not a regime. It's
okay, fair enough.
Go on, man.
Was that a Freudian slip? Anyhow, coming back to the point, Mr. Russell, the fact of the matter is that they're also now suggesting that H-1B visas are an Indian cottage industry. That sort of pincering of India now, even on that issue, blaming it for coming up with this and benefiting from it, creates once again the impression that this is more than just about tariffs. This is about something else.
I think I take issue with this sort of whole idea, again, of these mischaracterizations of these immigration issues. The American Indian population, there isn't any other way around it, is an extremely important and vibrant community. All anyone has to do is go out to Silicon Valley or anywhere on the West Coast or in any major urban area in the United States, and who do you see? You see American Indians with strong family ties pursuing the American dream, right? In some ways, they're more devoted to the American dream than the Americans themselves, oddly. But the point here is that we lack leadership, I think, at the grand strategic level to keep us focused on what's important and what's not. And that's my message to you, which is that.
So let me bring in Lisa Curtis on this point. If you listen to what's coming out of Washington, D.C. from the Trump regime, from the Trump administration, Lisa Curtis, it almost appears as if India is an interloper when it comes to global affairs, and Indians in the United States are parasites. Those formulations, not expressly spoken, but insinuated, they suggest that there's something greater at play here. What could it be, in your opinion?
Well, first, let me say, I think James made some really important points about the importance of the U.S.-India strategic relationship, how much people have been investing in this relationship, Republican, Democratic leaders alike, over the last 25 years. And I think that the Trump administration is mishandling this very important relationship. And we seem to be facing, what looks like a perfect storm. And the Trump administration seems to keep piling on with its criticisms and, barbs at India. And the latest one on the H-1B visas, it does concern me that this could be another problem that comes up between the two countries, and that even though things look pretty bad now, they could get worse between the U.S. and India under this second Trump administration. Which brings me to my next point about how differently the first Trump administration handled the relationship with India from now. And if we look back at the first Trump administration, where I served as senior director at the National Security Council, we see that the Trump administration saw India as an important partner in trying to manage China's rise. And there was a lot of investment in that relationship. And by the time Trump left office in January 2021, I would say the U.S.-India relationship was at an all-time high. Now, what do we see? We see a deteriorating relationship. We see Indians losing confidence and trust, hard-won trust that the U.S. has been trying to build for 20 years. We're seeing that go down the drain. We're seeing that, India is feeling more compelled to accommodate China rather than working with the United States in countering China's unhelpful behavior. Now India is feeling compelled to accommodate China.
So let me ask you, Lisa Curtis,
going to the SCO.
This is an important point because there is a feeling here in strategic and diplomatic circles that this is a Trump-centric problem, that it's not the United States, but it's just Trump. So if we sort of outlast Trump 3 years, things will get better. Do you share that optimism? Do you share that view?
Well, look, I've invested most of my career into building up this U.S.-India relationship. I'm a big believer in how important it is for United States national security. So I certainly do hope that things improve. I hope we don't have to wait 3.5 years. I think it's still possible for the two countries to do a trade deal and to get beyond this very low point in relations. But it's going to take compromise on both sides. Both sides are going to have to find a way to meet each other halfway. So that's what it's going to take. But I do think there's something to the idea that President Trump is leading the charge in what's happening to the U.S.-India relationship, and that this could have something to do with his frustration over India not acknowledging his role in bringing about the ceasefire between India and Pakistan in May. But this is something that we have to move past. President Trump may be frustrated and angry, but at the same time, Prime Minister Modi has his own domestic political considerations and, a history of India not accepting third-party mediation. This goes back to 1972, the Shimla Agreement, where India and Pakistan decided all issues would be decided bilaterally.
Yeah, that's true. So that is a problem, but it's also becoming personalized. I'm sure Mr. Navarro is not speaking without the endorsement of Mr. Trump. He couldn't have written an article in the Washington Post or what have you, without actually having got some sort of an approval. Would you agree?
That's not true.
Well, again, I think President Trump sets the tone, and he has set, unfortunately, a very negative tone toward India. And then you have people who may have never really understood the importance or supported, the importance of the U.S.-India relationship now, are given more rein to say things they may not have been able to say during the first Trump administration.
Well, we will now have to watch, viewers, what Washington has to say about Prime Minister's outreach at the SCO. This is going to be an interesting weekend. We leave it at that. Thank you very much.
This is News 18 Network. India's largest news network.
Dear shareholders, I am happy to share with you the details of yet another stellar year of business and financial performance achieved despite multiple challenges. In the financial year 25, Reliance delivered a record consolidated revenue of 10.71 lakh crores, becoming India's first ever company to cross $125 billion in annual revenues. Reliance's EBITDA stood at 1,83,422 crores and net profit grew to 81,309 crores. Reliance's exports were at 2,83,719 crores, contributing to 7.6% of India's total merchandise exports. Reliance invested cumulatively rupees 5.6 lakh crores in the last 3 years. Reliance remains the single largest contributor to the national exchequer, contributing rupees 2,10,269 crores in the financial year 25. In the last 6 years, Reliance's contribution to the national exchequer crossed rupees 10 lakh crores. I am also proud to report that Reliance's CSR spending in the financial year 25 rose to 2,156 crores. Reliance's cumulative CSR expenditure over the last 3 years crossed rupees 5,000 crores. This is a clear reflection of our unwavering commitment to social impact. Friends, employment generation for India's talented youth is a national priority. It is also a priority for Reliance. Globally, the dynamics of employments are undergoing a shift towards flexibility, driven mainly by AI and automation. Reliance has also adopted modern engagement formats that combine opportunities for upskilling, entrepreneurial drive, job satisfaction, and higher earning potential. Today, our conventional and non-conventional workforce has grown to nearly 6.8 lakh people. I see this growing to more than 10 lakh people over the next few years. It gives me immense satisfaction to say that we continue to be amongst the most admired employers and rank among the largest job creators in India. Reliance continues to lead across every key growth parameter: revenues, profitability, exports, market value, investments, contribution to the exchequer, and social impact. I am confident that Reliance will continue to break its own records in business performance next year and beyond. Dear friends, let me begin by sharing with you the impressive performance of our digital business. Just a week from now, Jio will enter its 10th year of service to the nation. Looking back, these years have been the most glorious in India's digital history. Today, I'm proud to share with you that the Jio family has crossed 500 million customers. The 500 million milestone is a symbol of your unwavering trust and support. I offer my heartfelt gratitude to each and every one of you. I have heard people say, Jio changed my life, and I love Jio. But I say from my heart, actually, each and every Indian built Jio by simply making it a part of their lives. Let me present a short video of our Jio journey, how 500 million Indians made Jio. All of you made Jio.
आइए दोस्तों, देश के अलग अलग हिस्सों में चलते हैं और भारत ने जियो कैसे बनाया उन किस्सों को सुनते हैं। ये है मुंबई के टीचर अभिषेक साठे, जो हर रोज कमाल कर रहा है।
बच्चा पार्टी, अपना अपना कैमरा ऑन करो। किसी को पीछे छूटने नहीं दिया जब हर एक बच्चे को पढ़ाया। जियो मैंने बनाया।
ऐसे कर्मठ टीचर्स की वजह से भारत का आने वाला कल कभी पीछे नहीं छूटा। जी हाँ देवी जी,
हमारी बहू रानी ने ना क्या कहा था? यूपी
माझे यूपीआई। जब मैंने यूपीआई से बिजनेस चलाया तब जियो मैंने बनाया।
वाह, कितने गर्व की बात। इनकी तरह आज 5 करोड़ छोटे बड़े दुकानदार यूपीआई का इस्तेमाल करके अपना बिजनेस फैला रहे हैं। आइए देखते हैं यहाँ क्या चल रहा है।
जब के ड्रामा को गांव में ट्रेन कराया तब जियो मैंने बनाया।
आज देश के 50 करोड़ लोग मनोरंजन का मजा फूंक फूंक के नहीं बल्कि दिल खोल के उठा रहे हैं।
हम सब बेस पर सही सलामत लौट आए हैं।
ये तेरा बेटा
बॉर्डर ऑपरेशन के बाद जब पापा को भरोसा दिलाया, तब जियो मैंने बनाया।
अब मिलते हैं उस माँ से जिसकी ममता का सफर बस अभी अभी शुरू हुआ है।
मदरहुड की जिम्मेदारी के साथ साथ ऑफिस भी निभाया। जियो मैंने बनाया।
जहां देश की लाखों महिलाएं अपने ऑफिस से रिमोटली जुड़ी, वहीं कोविड के मुश्किल दौर में लाखों जानें भी बची।
जब वीडियो कॉल्स के थ्रू मैंने अपने पेशेंट्स तक इलाज पहुंचाया, तब जियो मैंने बनाया।
जब से मन ने इस फोन को अपना घना यार बनाया, तब से जियो मन ने बनाया। तू मन ने यो बता, यो हॉर्टिकल्चर से उपज कैसे बढ़ सके हैं?
सही जानकारी के साथ यारी करने का लाभ आज दूर दराज के गांव के 10 करोड़ किसान उठा रहे हैं।
देसी कारीगरी को दुनिया तक पहुंचाया, जियो मैंने बनाया।
करोड़ों व्यापारी अपने ऑर्डर्स का ग्राफ बढ़ा रहे हैं और मेक इन इंडिया का झंडा लहरा रहे हैं। जब भारत की जनता ने हर छक्के, हर चौके को जश्न की तरह मनाया, तब जियो मैंने।
Hello, Namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma. It's not every day that you walk into a summit venue and find yourself being greeted by a robot. But welcome to Tianjin, where the future is on full display. Humanoid machines, cutting-edge gadgets and technology everywhere you look. China is making a point as it hosts this year's SCO summit. But why in Tianjin? We will discuss that tonight. And before Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrives here, he made a stop in Japan. So what did the first leg of his tour look like? And why is his next stop, China, so crucial? After all, this is Prime Minister Modi's first visit to China in 7 years. And many are asking what triggered the thaw. Was it a secret letter from President Xi Jinping? We'll discuss that too. Meanwhile, in Washington, Trump's tariff rants roll on. Another